Yesterday we looked at the garbage can at the end of class, and we were talking about how the older garbage would be at the bottom and the newer garbage would be at the top. And the reason why we talked about that yesterday was because of this. When we look at rock layers, the younger rock is going to be up on top and the older rock is going to be at the bottom. So that's why we wanted to kind of compare that, because you understand that the older stuff goes in the bottom, newer stuff on top, and rocks are just like that. If we go outside and we look at rocks and we look at layers of rock, the new rocks are on top, older rocks are in the bottom. So that's why we were looking at that. Today we want to see if we can get some evidence for the fact that Africa was once touching South America. We figured out that South America and Africa are moving apart, and we kind of calculated that maybe about 150 million years ago they would have been touching. So we want to see if we can find some evidence for that. What we're going to do is look at this form. So you can download this form from Schoology. I'm just going to kind of walk you through, and then we will look at some of the maps we need to see. So first thing we have to do is read this here. It says, make a claim about Africa and South America by completing the sentence below. What you're going to do here after we look at the evidence, not before, but after we look at the evidence, you're going to put one of these two words in that blank. So you're either going to have Africa and South America were touching in the distant past, or you're going to make it Africa and South America were not touching in the distant past. Okay? So based on the evidence, not what you've been told, but based on our evidence. Next thing it says is, what evidence did you see today that supports your claim? We're going to be looking at that next. Record the sources of evidence that you use to make your decisions. In the third column, this one here, use that to explain why that source of evidence supported or refuted your claim that they were or were not. Okay? So, and we're going to assume kind of that they are, and we're going to kind of base everything on that. And then you can say if you wanted to support the idea or not. We look at 6 maps. One map is going to be about similar rock and mineral types. We're going to look at one for evidence of past coral reefs. We're going to look at one at similar rock layers and formations. One about evidence of past glaciers. One showing a location of fossils. And the last one showing evidence of past mountains. So you're going to download this and send it to Notability so you can write on it and kind of go back and forth between that and the video. You can pause the video when it comes time to look at the maps. So our first map is this one. So we have areas of orange. Orange are showing similar rocks, so maybe they're all sandstone and orange, or all granite, whatever it might be. But they're showing us similar rocks in these areas on these two continents as they are now. This is where they find them. That's kind of hard to tell if they were in the same spot. So what I did is I took those and I cut them apart so that we have this. So here's where Africa kind of is. And we can go backwards. Like we said, they're pulling apart, so we just go backwards. And if I lay them like this, you kind of get the idea that the parts where they're touching, it kind of looks like they might have been together. So it looks like you could take this orange, I'm going to use my pointer here with the pen. So it looks like you kind of wrap around here, and that would turn into one big orange spot here. And then this one down here would almost turn into one orange spot, even though they're on different continents. So it looks like they almost were meant to be together, right? So this would be supporting that they were together. So on this form, we would put an S, so saying that they were together. It's supporting the idea that they were together. And then over here, we would say why we thought that. So we could say, when we put these two continents together, the rocks that were similar are like touching each other. They're like in the same spots as if they had been together. Okay? So you can write that down. You might want to pause after each time we show one of these maps and do that. Next one is evidence of past corals. So the green shows where coral used to be 150 million years ago. Again, it's hard to see what we're doing here, so I cut that apart. And we put them together again. And now this time, the greens are on opposite sides. This doesn't really support our idea that they were together at one time. The greens aren't touching like the orange was. So this really isn't helping us. So what I would do here is to evidence of past coral reefs, I would put an R for refute. It's not supporting our idea. And we might say something like, when we put these consonants together, the coral reef areas are not touching. They're not in the same areas. It's not helping us support the idea that they weren't together in one spot. Okay? We go back. Now, I'm not going to explain each one. I'm just going to show you the maps. And what you can do now is just pause and try to figure out if you want to support or refute. So here's another one. So this is where we have a rock layer labeled C, a rock layer labeled A, and here are your rock layers. This is kind of where you've got the trash can idea. Are these similar enough as we go up to say that they're from the same rock layers, maybe with a couple changes? Or do you think that they're so different that they are not from the same rock layers and these continents were never together? If you think they're similar enough, you're going to put an S and explain why you think it shows that the two continents are together. If you think they're too different, you're going to put an R and explain why. So you got to decide what you want to do. You probably want to pause here and fill out your sheet and then come back when you're ready. The next map is showing evidence of past glaciers, and this is down here. So again, if you put these together, does this support? If you think this says that they were together at one point, you're going to put an S and explain why. If you think you put these together and they don't support that idea, you're going to put an R. Again, pause, write down your response. Our next map is showing locations of fossils. I'm going to explain this one just a little bit. So we have 4 different types of things we found as fossils. Glossopteris, this green star, was a plant. The other ones were all sorts of animals from 150 million years ago. Again, imagine we stick these together. Do things match up or don't they? So again, pause. Kind of write down, if you think this shows that they were together, you can put an S and explain why. If you put these together and you don't think that it helps support your idea, you can put an R and explain why. Our last one, evidence of past mountains. So again, you put these together. Find out where the purple areas match up. That's where mountains used to be. If you think this helps you put them together in one continent, you're going to put an S and explain why. If you put them together and you don't think this looks like it should work, it'll be an R, and you also explain why. Finally, what you're going to do is now go back and put a were or were not. So you're going to look at your S's and your R's. You're going to kind of find out who won. S's, if it was an S, you're going to say, yes, they were touching. If your R's won, then you're going to say were not. So did you find evidence to support or not that they were touching in a distant past? Finally, last 2 questions. When you were doing this, did you find that the more maps we looked at, you became more certain of your answer or less certain? Was getting more information making it easier to decide, or was getting more information making it harder to decide? So just tell me which one, more sure or less sure, and then explain why you said that. Last question. Do you think the other continents might have been in different places during that time period? So we only looked at Africa and South America. What about North America, Europe, Asia, Antarctica, and Australia? What happens if we looked at those guys? Do you think they were all in one place at one time before? If you say yes, that's great. If you say no, that's great. to prove whether you said yes or no, what kind of data, what kind of maps would you want me to give you so that you could prove that point? Do you want to see these same types of maps? Do you want to see different maps? Has to be something from 150 million years ago. Pretend I can get the information for you. I know we don't have maps from back then, but pretend I could get you a map that showed where things are, where they are now, and then you could kind of cut them apart and put them back together. What kind of map information would you want me to show you? And that's the last one. So go ahead, finish this up, and then submit that to the assignment for this day's activity.